It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 240. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Phelan.
Hey.
So, yeah, Anthem launched.
It was?
Asterisk.
Wait, what?
Asterisk.
I mean, can I play Anthem now?
You can actually play Anthem if you do some things. Yeah, like this is a topic worth talking about, but we're not going to get super deep into it tonight because like a significant portion of the player base won't get it until next Friday. But basically, this is another one of those spreadsheet launches where there's like a grid to figure out when you can actually play the game.
So I saw that they tweeted out like their spreadsheet, and I had to like pay a whole bunch of money if I wanted to play it a week early, and I thought that looked like nonsense to me. So
basically, there is Origin Access, and it now comes in two flavors. It comes in the $5 flavor, and it comes in the $15 flavor. And other than being a lot more money, and I'm not really sure what the difference is.
Origin Access Premier is basically EA Netflix for games. You
get
access to their games.
Origin Access was Netflix for game already?
It is, but you don't get the new stuff.
Oh, okay.
That's basically the difference there. Premier has the new stuff.
Yeah, so the primary difference between these two right now, for the sake of Anthem, is if you've got the $5 one, you can play the game for 10 hours prior to next Friday.
This used to be the only one that existed.
Right. And both Ash and I did this for Andromeda, I believe, largely because doing this gives you a 10% discount on buying a game anyway. So, yeah, like that one seemed pretty worthwhile. Like you can get a cheap version of the game. The Premier one, however, basically allows you to play whatever the highest version of the game is. So, like if there was a $130 version of the game, like you get that through Premier. Also, for Premier account holders, they just got the game. Like it launched one full week ahead of for everyone else.
And that's the $15 a month subscription.
That is the $15 a month subscription. I am a sucker, and I did this thing so I could play the full game a week ahead because I've already put in 10 hours as of tonight.
I was less of a sucker, and I'm on a timer, but only slightly less of a sucker.
I did the timer for Andromeda, and the game didn't register that it had logged out, and I lost all of my time because of it. So, like, I was kind of hesitant to do that again.
So, to clarify a couple of things. If I pay $5 right now...
Yes.
Do I still get that 10% off of the game I'm purchasing?
Yes.
Yes.
So, and I'm assuming this is a $60 game?
Minimum, yes.
So, I would be paying effectively $-1 to play 10 hours of the game?
That's correct.
Alright, cool. I think I'll do this.
Yeah, like, I mean, the $5 one, if it's a game you're going to buy anyway, is a no-brainer. The $15 one...
As long as you remember to cancel.
Cancel.
Mm-hmm.
The $15 one, however, is just me having no common sense, apparently.
No, I don't think it's no common sense. I understand why. I think it's no self-control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because this makes sense to me. It's something I would do for that instant gratification hit. I'm not going to, but it's something I do see myself potentially doing.
Yeah, like for me, I enjoyed Alpha. I enjoyed one of the two demo weekends. But like, I enjoyed enough of the first demo weekend to make me want to play the second one. So, yeah, like I was ready to play it for real, legitimately so.
So the actual real release for everybody to play it as much as they like is next Friday.
Yep.
And if I were to buy the game...
This is also more relevant if you want to play it on a console.
And if I were to buy the game and start playing it then, I would be how far behind?
Not terribly.
10
honestly.
hours behind people who had the $5 version at most.
So, like, one
100 hours behind
game,
now.
Maybe.
Yeah. One of the good things about this game is, like, it doesn't seem to care at all about levels. You can group with people without issue. Like, a level 1... So there's a little bit of tutorialing that happens, but once you've gotten out of that tutorial, you can basically freely group with anybody else. I would assume it's grouping downwards only, to where, like, I can come help with your stuff, but it's not going to be basically like steamrolling it. Because, like, I've had level 20 players in groups with me at level 10, and even at, like, level 5, there were still 20s for some reason that must not have slept. And it wasn't noticeable. Like, the difference between us wasn't noticeable, and, like, on the scoring at the end of the match, it wasn't noticeable.
End of level scoring is not zero sum, is worth noting. Like, it's
basically what you did.
Yeah, it's stuff you did. So you'll get a score, but, like, you getting that score is totally independent of anybody else getting a score.
I mean, to a certain extent, maybe you can't kill 50 enemies with melee attacks if everybody else kills everything first, but...
And the difference between, like, 1 bar full of accolades and 2 bars full of accolades isn't that much, and I don't know if I've ever exited an encounter without at least 4 of those accolades, which represents the first bar.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because Anthem, and there's been a couple of other games that are kind of like this, but it feels like they know 2 things. They know that differences in levels make for bad experiences, where if you can't play with your friends because you're different levels, that's bad. But also, having literally everybody in the world start at the exact same time so that you minimize the potential for level discrepancies is a great way for their servers to just die in a fire.
Yup.
And so the design approach, so it's like, okay, we can design our way out of this problem by making levels not that important. And I think that that's great.
There's also a bit about, apparently they're using AWS for servers.
So they can spin them up real fast. I mean, there's been some minor hiccups this weekend, but all in all, it's been smooth. There was one quest that went horribly south for me, and it was a quest where here's a mission, then there's a lengthy cutscene that's part of the story, and then there's another little bit of mission. And something went wrong while we were in the cutscene, and never managed to get back together for the second part. And then I had to do the whole mission over, but that only happened the one time, and it was manageable. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. Also, grouping is, like, feels really seamless, and I've had a couple of people from my friends list just randomly join me in groups, and I didn't even realize it until we got to the very end, because I was just flying around and with a couple other freelancers, and I didn't notice that they were people I knew.
Neat.
But anyway, so the long and short is it's actually a really good game. It is very much a Bioware game. It
is shockingly a Bioware game.
It has already introduced me to a whole cast of characters that I care deeply about and want to do well in the world.
Do they have names?
They have names.
Yes. They have names, they have personalities, they have quest lines.
Also, I have seen
dialogue.
Changes due to the dialogues that I've had with characters. Like, the world is subtly altered by the decisions I've made. Or at least Fort Tarsus is subtly altered. I don't know how deep that rabbit hole goes, because, like, right now it's pretty minor changes.
Yeah,
also,
it feels kind of like BioWare is doing the Shadowrun games, the more recent ones.
Yes. Also, they have managed to create a world as compelling as Mass Effect. Like, already I am super into this world and very curious about all these names and places and people that they keep dropping little bits at a time, but then they keep giving more and more information about them.
And sometimes they will even take a bunch of time to explain a bit of world history to you in the form of a cutscene.
And pretty much everything that you interact with the world drops a page worth of information into your cortex. There's so much information in the cortex.
They decided they do have time to explain?
They do have time to explain.
That's
also,
nice.
Remember getting mail from random people in Mass Effect games? That's a thing here too.
Yeah, even in just like playing for a couple of hours, the game has really great writing. Like, characters have made me laugh, mail has made me laugh. It's really snappy. It's like, it's got a sense of humor about itself, even though it's kind of a really, like, this could be a really dark, joyless world. Because it's sort of dark, but it's not. It's a joyful, like, fun experience, even though, and you like dig up more lore and you're like, oh. So it manages to be dark without like wallowing in it.
And it kind of does the opposite thing as Destiny, to where Destiny sets up this super grim world and tells you that you are literally in the last city on Earth. This game, on the other hand, keeps telling you about all these places that are better than the place that you're in right now. You're basically out on the frontier. Like, there's a lot more civilization out there, just not where you're at. But anyway, I would highly suggest picking it up this coming Friday, if not doing the $5 10-hour thing. It is a super interesting game. Also, combat keeps feeling better and better. They fixed the flight and swimming with mouse and keyboard.
Oh, does it feel better?
Flight definitely feels better.
Yeah, swimming still
exists.
Goofy. Swimming is still goofy, but it's like better than it was.
Yeah, I feel like having played with it some more, I understand what they wanted to accomplish with swimming. And I feel like they succeeded, but I don't feel like
that was an admirable goal.
Yeah, like, so you've got a ton of control in the sky. And like one of the things that like when you're thinking about movement in games, you really want to have like a couple of axes on which you have a bunch of control, and then some axes on which you don't, to continually remind you of the freedom you have. It's one of the reasons why like the like Descent style, all degrees of freedom, you can move in any direction without bound, like kind of fell off because they don't make movement feel meaningful because you're just too powerful. Like your movement is too good. And so most games, it's like you can move around on the ground really great, but like verticality is a thing that you have to like think about and struggle with to deal with. And in this game, like verticality is whatever. You can just fly. And so where they give you those touches of loss of control or like feeling like you don't have that same like control of movement is when you're in the water. And they don't make you do it often, but every sequence I've seen where they make you swim it's just get from point A to point B, the way that like a platforming section might be. And it works because you sort of go into the water and you feel like you're like, oh, I've really got to struggle to get control, and like I lose my bearings really easily and so on. But like I'm not sure that's a fun experience.
Well, and I will say, like, the changes that they made have stopped the whole, I'm entering the water, now my camera is just spinning uncontrollably for a while, and God, I hope I figure out which way is up.
Yeah.
Because, like, that was absolutely a thing with, like, the controls that they had previously. Now it's like, oh, I'm kind of uneasy in this thing, I'm gonna have to stop for a second and figure out where I'm supposed to go, but it's not...
It forces you to slow down. It forces you to like stop and look around slowly and get a sense of where you're at. And it's not like the freewheeling, like blip around while you're flying and like hit crazy speeds and not really care. But so it's like I sort of see what the design is doing, and I understand like why you would feel the need for it, but also.
Well, it reminds me a lot of the uneasy feeling that you have on like an ice level on a platformer.
Yes.
To where your controls are not exactly as good as you want them to, so you kind of have to stop and rewire your brain for how to move through this new medium.
Yeah, it forces you to think about the kind of movement that you'd already been taken for granted. And I think that one of the reasons why it works in platformer, like it works in games where you're ground bound and moving up and down is kind of the place where you struggle, whereas it feels much more awkward in Anthem. It's partly because we're not used to being able to move in 3 dimensions so easily, but also because if you're walking around on the ground, you don't expect to be able to, like, it feels fine. It feels natural and normal for you to be able to move, for you to not be able to move upward at will. But in Anthem, you can fly. And so moving around in the water doesn't seem like it should feel that much different from flying, but it does.
But mostly, like, if you were on the edge about whether or not Anthem is a game that is enjoyable, it is very enjoyable. And it also has a good story, which is not always something that you can take for granted. I think next, we finally get a name for what Hornet is going to be.
Well, a lot more than that. We were told it was going to be a DLC.
I mean, the Kickstarter said it was going to be a DLC.
Everyone has been saying they're working on the Hornet DLC that I've seen.
The Kickstarter said it would be a DLC. But also the Kickstarter said Shadowrun Dragonfall would be a DLC.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're getting a whole new game. A whole new game that's supposed to be bigger in scale and scope than Hollow Knight. Featuring around Hornet with a reveal trailer that looks just awesome. Tons of new enemies, tons of new NPCs, tons of new, very awesome looking maneuvers going on with Hornet.
I'm curious to see, how interaction with NPCs and the story and everything are different, since we're playing a main character that's a real people and can talk.
At least mostly are real people.
She's at least half real people.
It's true.
She's definitely something, but all of the stuff that you saw her do against you as a boss looks like stuff you'll be able to do as a player, which is also really cool.
Yes, I'm also curious what the explanation will be for why we can't do all of those things immediately.
Maybe we can?
I mean, it's possible. It seems unlikely. Like, that's a lot of abilities to have all at once at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, there's also a bunch of new stuff that they showed that she couldn't do. So, the only stuff that she does in the game is she has some dashes. She has dashes, she has the spinny thing, and then in the second fight she has the little spike balls in the sky. So that's only really 3 powers.
She has a ranged attack.
Yeah, she can throw the needle.
Oh, alright, I forgot that.
Which is also shown in the trailer. I wouldn't expect to start with the dash, honestly. Could be wrong.
But yes, it looks like Hornet has been taken far, far away from Hollow Nest.
Good.
Presumably against her will.
Maybe.
I mean, it sure looks against her will. Although maybe she just wants to get very far, far away from Hollow Nest because the true ending. I can't
blame her.
The true ending says something really bad might be happening.
I'd be worried if she didn't want to get really far away from Hollow Nest.
Details.
But yeah, she looks like she's going to control even more airily well than Hollow Knight did. And I loved the feel of aerial combat in Hollow Knight. So I'm super excited about that.
Aerial combat in Hollow Knight is pretty bouncy. It seems like Hornet will be less bouncy and more flowy.
Yeah.
Which might be weird.
Yeah, it might take getting used. Yeah. That was the top of a week of really good games announcements, but boy am I super hyped for Hollow Knight Silksong and new lore.
Do we have any kind of a timetable for it yet?
Nope.
When it's done. Yeah, I would expect I expect it's going to take a while. I think this might have been letting us know that we're increasing the scope of things. They did say they're going to, for the first time, launch on a console. So it will be on the Nintendo Switch at launch.
Just Nintendo Switch or like all the platforms?
Just
Nintendo Switch. And PC.
Interesting.
Yeah. PC.
I suspect, just a thought, they might have gotten a lot more sales on one platform than the others.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone here rebought it on Switch.
Maybe.
Yep.
I mean, I probably would if I had a Switch.
I mean, that's a thing that needs to be remedied at some point. Just saying. Especially considering, like, we also got a big Nintendo Direct.
Super Mario Maker 2!
Now with slopes.
Now with slopes.
We figured hills out.
Playing any sort of like a mobile screen-bearing device while my son is awake is problematic currently. So
I'm familiar with this. Does your son also like play games on touchscreens?
I mean, he definitely likes touching things and swiping stuff. The one time I tried downloading a game for him, he kept like accidentally pulling the config bar down. So I kept having to put it back into the game for him. He does like watching Sesame Street videos though, so
Yep.
he knows Elmo lives inside the tiny box, so I should give him the tiny box.
I will say, Switch. Another great use case of the Switch is playing in bed before you fall asleep.
But yeah, Super Mario Maker 2 is what they open with, and I'm super excited about that. I'm not very good at Mario. Like that game I'm really curious to see how they're going to do curation. They managed to figure out a pretty good sweet spot where there is easy, medium, hard, and nope. Nope. Where they basically have the concept of 100 Mario runs where you can play random levels, and nope is actually called Super Expert, and you shouldn't do it. You have 100 Marios to beat 6 levels, and that's not reasonable.
6 levels?
Yep. Like, Expert is 16 levels. You have to beat 16 levels with 100 Marios. And then to ramp it up, they go down to 6, because you are getting the very worst, like, most nonsense awful levels. Like, both sub-levels that are genuinely good and very hard, and some levels that are just frustrating and awful. But it's fine. You can play expert levels or medium levels or easy levels, and those are generally pretty great. And there's a really big community of creators who you're gonna have a whole bunch of creators who have been making Mario Maker levels for 3 years now, who have come up with a bunch of really interesting creative stuff, and they're absolutely gonna be figuring out how to push the bounds of all of the new technology they have, and it's really exciting to see what they're gonna do with it. Also, it means I finally can just officially stop using my Wii U for absolutely anything.
That's the only reason why I never bought Mario Maker for the Wii U, is that I just don't like using the Wii U.
Well, now you can get it on the Switch.
Yeah, like, I would have been perfectly fine if they just ported Mario Maker to the Switch. But a better version of it? Yeah, sure.
There's some implications that there's going to be co-op, and whether it's cooperative building or cooperative playing is still a interesting question.
I feel like if they gave us an Excite Bike type level to where, like, I build one for you, and then you play it, then you build one for me, and then I play it, would be interesting.
Yeah, levels, it's one of those things where the time it takes to beat a level versus the time it takes to make a level is a pretty big gulf. Like, to make a good level, you are sinking a lot of time into that.
I do not have the design chops to make Mario levels. It's just like not a thing, not a skill I have.
But
I was
people
thinking,
do, so it's interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, it's true. That's why it's super cool to watch.
This is how I felt about Little Big Planet as well.
Yes, I feel very similarly about Little Big Planet.
I really liked playing other people's levels in Little Big Planet.
Yep.
Although, Belle talking about like an Excite Bike, I went straight to Ultimate Chicken Horse. Like Ultimate Mario Horse.
Well, I just, like, back in the day, that was how we played Excite Bike, because there was builder mode, and, like, we would sit around, and, like, one of us would go into the other room and, like, read comics or something, like, while we built a level, and then they'd come in and try and race through it, and it was insane fun. I also had a lot more free time back then.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, that was when I was super into Grendel.
Comic.
I think the game that I was most excited about from Nintendo Direct was Link's Awakening.
Ooh, that was a good one.
Because I've never played Link's Awakening.
Either. I sort of didn't have a whole lot for the original Game Boy after Pokemon, and I never caught the remake for the Game Boy Color.
I really love the way that they're making the world look in it, too.
I mean, it looks like they took some hints out of Link Between Worlds.
Yeah.
So this is yet another one of those games that hipster Zelda fans love. So of course I think it's awesome. This is probably of those, like, it's probably one of the more well-beloved ones. I know it's really cool, though. One of the things that makes it different than most Zelda games is the fact that it has jumping in it with the Rock's Feather as an item, and that's like one of the first items you get, so you are jumping around throughout most of the game.
Doesn't it also have some fairly unique power-ups?
Kind of. I think it might have been the introduction to the hook shot.
Maybe that was it.
The Link's Awakening did not come out before Link to the Past, I don't think.
Oh, it didn't?
I really don't think so.
No, it was pretty early on. No, I mean, like, hang on, we'll have to look this up.
Looked it up. Came out 2 years later.
Yeah.
And that is, Link's Awakening came out 2 years after Link to the Past.
Okay, well then that makes sense why it uses that styling and visual vocabulary as opposed to original Zelda.
Yeah, like I definitely remember it being A Link to the Past, but on the Game Boy. Like being the feel of it.
But after the Super Nintendo came out, I wasn't playing my Nintendo or my Game Boy much. So there's a whole bunch of these titles that I just completely missed. So how many Final Fantasy games are coming out on the Switch?
The re-releases of 7 and 9 and also Chocobo's Dungeon, the version that came out for the Wii originally. So that one's more of a remake than a re-release.
And once again, no 8 at
8
all.
gets
No
no
8.
love.
No 8, because they don't have a version of 8 ready to go. Like, it's the only one that has been ported everywhere for some reason.
I mean, and that's the one that's like constantly rumored that they may have lost part of the source.
I have no idea.
Stranger things have happened.
I mean, because like it's not available on any platform that it didn't come out on originally. I don't think, is it?
I don't think so.
I don't think
Like,
it is.
It may be available through PlayStation Network, but like as
a PS1 classic, yeah.
Yeah, PS1 classic. And then it's on Steam, but it was originally released on the PC, so...
Wait, is it on Steam?
It used to be on Steam.
Okay, it's on Steam.
Yeah, because like... But I remember it being released at the same time as the console versions on Windows.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because Final Fantasy VII was where they started doing PC releases.
Right.
And Final Fantasy VIII is where they stopped.
Yep.
Until
Those
13.
Those ports were garbage.
I couldn't speak for the Final Fantasy VIII port. The Final Fantasy VII port was why I bought a PlayStation.
I mean...
It was awful.
It was all I had. That's how I played through 7.
I was going to say, I've
I'm
actually
sorry.
never played the regular 7.
Nah, me either. Like I've played the PC port and that's it. Like, and by the time I got a PlayStation, I don't know, like I never went back through and played it again.
I don't think I ever made it out of the initial like Midgard section at the beginning of the game in the PC port because it kept crashing the desktop due to running out of memory.
Oh, see, like I
Because it
didn't.
had an awful
bad.
memory leak.
I don't know. Like for me, it was always fairly stable, but it just had a horrible soundtrack. It was MIDI, but I had a decent sound card, which helped a little bit because it allowed me to shift it and have it use a real instrument pack for MIDI.
I remember there being patches to it long after it was relevant, like years and years later, that could actually like, restore the soundtrack to that game on the PC copy. But yeah, I think I tried to play it on PC at one point. But more, that game is infamous for I tried to play it on the PlayStation and I attempted to follow instructions and died horribly multiple times.
Ha!
Because it
Yeah,
tells you to
that'll
attack
happen.
while the tail is up.
Yeah. Wow, you're not kidding. The patch you speak of was released in 2013.
Which might have been when it showed up on Steam.
No.
I mean, it was definitely on Steam by that point because this article says the update will be automatically be applied next time you launch the game, either via the Square Enix store or Steam.
I think there was a fan patch before that, but it was still like
Probably.
mid-2000s.
I remember trying to use Bleem to play Final Fantasy VII on the PC before the
Yes.
PC release came out.
Yes.
That didn't work
No, it didn't.
at all.
I also tried this thing.
Because, like, Bleem was shockingly available in Best Buy.
Yeah, it's just there on the shelf. Like, I'm not entirely sure how they got away with that.
I mean, they didn't for long, I don't think. I think that's why it disappeared. But there was also Bleemcast, which was the Dreamcast version. Fire Emblem, I I assume this is going to be my first Fire Emblem game.
Are you going to jump in here with this one?
I've never played one. And everybody talks about them being amazing games. And
I'm looking forward to it.
This is the one where you're going to Harry Potter school?
You are a professor at Harry Potter school.
Yes.
I'm here for it.
Okay.
And all of your units are your students?
Apparently.
I have to say, so isn't one of the core conceits of a Fire Emblem game?
That was a core conceit of Awakening.
Okay.
It has been a core conceit of Fire Emblem, always.
Okay, I was a little concerned.
As it turns out, they added this thing, and it made the
series very popular.
It made the series very popular, and people who never got into the series before then, because it was a kind of dry strategy game, are now very excited about it, and are like, "Wait, isn't this the strategy game where you have all of your units hook up?
Where you breed your Marths to make more Marths?"
I mean, that's the part that I've heard the most about.
And we're teachers at a school. I'm just saying.
Look, even if that's a thing, it would be less creepy than Fates.
I'm curious now. How is Fates creepier than that?
Oh boy.
You want to handle this one?
No.
Because I really don't either.
This is the So Fire Emblem Fates. So it's all of the same things that you might expect from Awakening, except that something 80 to 90% of your unit selection are people who are either may or may not be members of your family, or may or may not be servants of your members of your family. So anytime there isn't it's creepy in one way or another.
It's very hard to get non-incestual or very creepy power dynamic relationships going on.
Yes.
Got it.
So what I'm hearing is it's best just not to think about it.
I mean, you don't have a lot of choice, but which is
I
of course
didn't actually play Fates, so I don't think that is really discussed much in game at all.
No, it's
it's kind of glossed over the whole thing.
It's like Schrodinger's sibling. I think depending on I haven't played it all the way through, but I think depending on the choices you make, you may or may not discover that this person is or is not a family member, so as not to make it weird. I mean, cue a whole bunch of people.
I don't think that doesn't make it weird.
Also cue a bunch of people going I did not play all the way through Fates, so I'm really only going off of what parts of it I saw, so there's probably some listener who has a lot better idea of Fire Emblem Fates than me.
Anyway, Awakening made that sort of thing popular, so it's probably going to be a thing moving forward. That's just where we are.
Yep.
Okay. Captain Toad got a DLC?
Yep.
And co-op.
How old is Captain Toad at this point?
I mean, this release is only a year old.
Well, yeah, but it's just a port.
It was a Wii U game. Because the thing that released on Switch is Wii U games.
Wii U had a lot of good games. It's too bad no one bought the console.
Right. Nobody bought a Wii U, so any good game on the Wii U is slowly getting rescued on the Switch.
Yeah, and I'm happy for this. I've said this numerous times, Wii U is just not an enjoyable console to use. So, have you ever wanted to do Tetris Battle Royale?
I mean, before this week, I hadn't even considered it.
Yeah. Same.
This is a thing that I'm not sure anyone's ever asked for, but okay.
But it got delivered, and it's kind of amazing.
I was commenting earlier that I think we even had the conversation Battle Royale is if you really want to lose a bunch of money, try releasing a game into the Battle Royale space, because that's crazy overcrowded, and yet here we are.
In before Carcassonne Battle Royale.
Also, Apex Legends released a week and a half ago.
Yeah, Apex Legends. And Apex Legends is
shockingly good.
Shockingly good. And then also this Tetris thing, which is a weird breath of fresh air into the Battle Royale genre. I honestly didn't think that was possible.
But also, turns out a lot of different types of people like Tetris. A lot of people, in fact, like Tetris.
I mean, I think
would have guessed?
Tetris is as ubiquitous as Match 3 games. It's just a thing that everybody's played at least some of throughout the years.
Like, I do feel like it's one of those game types that if you have played a video game, you have probably played a Tetris game, or a cheap Tetris ripoff at least.
I mean, I knew a lot of people that owned a Game Boy but never bought any other games and just played Tetris. It was their Tetris machine.
So yeah, a lot of people are into Tetris, and so a Battle Royale makes perfect sense. It's also free, and therefore provides another reason for people to subscribe to Switch Online, which is a thing they seem to have been working on. The president, I think, said that in one of their recent things. They want more reasons for people to subscribe to Switch Online.
Mission accomplished. Good work, you did it.
Seriously, I'm still holding out for SNES games, though. Not that they don't already have me, but even so.
Mean, I really want SNES games, and I really want, like, Game Boy Advance games.
I think Nintendo sometimes forgets that Game Boy Advance games exist.
They're great games.
It's true. There are a lot of great games on GBA, including the second best Kirby game.
I mean, I feel like it would be really nice if we could do 4-Job Fiesta from the Switch. Just saying, Nintendo. Also, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night got a season.
Yeah, we don't have an actual release date.
It's a season.
It's summer.
I mean, like that's enough for me to hold hope on. I mean,
no.
They came with a gameplay trailer, so that implies they've
done more work. Yes,
done enough to be able to do an actual gameplay trailer. That's something.
I mean, it was a gameplay trailer that was not off of the Unreal Engine demo that I have through Steam.
Yes. It was gameplay that is not part of the previously released demo, which is a good step, I think.
I mean, the game has gotten nicer looking instead of the other direction. I'm looking at you, Mighty Number 9.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's at least a thing, and I was happy to see it. I was happy to see it still being mentioned. I was afraid that it would, like, quietly just keep slipping.
So yeah, that has a date. Well, a season. In announcements that were definitely a surprise, we have Boxboy plus Boxgirl, a co-op version of Boxboy.
I have no idea what this game is.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle platformer for the 3DS, involving, like, you can make little weird boxes and use these to manipulate the environment and, like, manipulate how far, like, your own hitbox and move around and things like that.
Okay.
It was definitely weird. And as such, I am surprised it got a sequel, but here we are. The next game, though, Yoshi's Crafted World, actually has a date. It had a date before the Direct, and they didn't even show that much more of it. They just sort of offhandedly mentioned it. But I'm definitely here for another Yoshi game.
Okay, what was Astral Chain? I think I
Platinum.
missed this one.
It was Platinum.
Okay.
Platinum is making a game where you have a robot partner, and work with your robot partner to, I don't know, be a weird police force and do crazy Platinum action things. I don't actually know how any of it works. Looks cool, though.
So long as that partner is more effective than Rob the robot, I'll be fine.
I mean, one of them was a robot doggy, so, well, what's not to like?
Okay, now I had more questions regarding the next one on this list. Was the game that we got Chapter 1?
Presumably.
Deltarune?
Deltarune.
Yeah, that was Chapter 1.
Okay, that's coming out on the Switch.
For free, at least for this chapter. Future chapters will not be free.
But also, there will be future chapters.
There will be future chapters. Presumably, Toby Fox is putting together a team. I wish him well. I do enjoy his promotional material, though.
He has a very irreverent approach to trailers in general, and it's kind of great.
But yeah, if you haven't played Deltarune, you'll be able to play Deltarune on the Switch. Also,
it's free on PC, so you can just play it now if you want.
It's also free on PC.
I feel like it bears mention that in other Switch news, Keen Dreams is apparently on the Switch.
That was not part of the Direct, and also not good news.
I mean, it is a Commander Keen game.
Technically.
I believe I said that this is the effects of me wishing on a monkey's paw. I did want a new Commander Keen release, but
just not like this.
Just not like this. Not like this.
It's like the Highlander 2 of Commander Keen games. We just all wish it would go away.
Maybe there's like a double special secret foreign release that makes it a watchable experience, like was always rumored about Highlander 2 but never actually existed.
Keen Dreams is a game I played. I actually haven't gone back and played it. I don't actually know how terrible it is. Although I do remember thinking, wow, it really sucks that I don't have the gun that I enjoyed playing with so much. And this was when I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9, and I didn't have good taste back then. I can't imagine this game is any good.
I mean, part of me is morbidly curious at this point, because I know I played it back in the day. I just don't remember anything about it. And I don't know if that's me willfully like omitting it from my memory because it was that scarring, or if it was just unmemorable.
I remember disappointment.
Yeah, it's you have no pogo stick. You turn enemies into flowers instead of shooting them. It's very different.
Okay, so I'm gonna like interject a side topic here because it came up this week. Since we're sort of talking about the Switch, I had a friend that has a PC ask like Twitter in general if they should get a Switch or a PS4, and I feel like the answer was both, but
it depends on what sort of games they like.
Yep.
For the most part, if you like Nintendo games, you should get a Switch.
Yeah. I feel like the Switch offers a lot of really interesting use cases that make it very worth it. Also, I find myself buying games on that platform more than the PS4 at this point, especially if it's like a game that's on multiple platforms. I will end up buying it on the Switch instead, or just waiting for it to come out on the Switch, since a lot of indie games come out on the Switch anyway. But I also feel like the PS4 has a lot of compelling exclusives. I would probably pay for the price of a PS4 just to play Horizon Zero Dawn.
The Second Son is one of the games that got me into the PS4.
Okay, Tam, I have no clue if we have enough time for this topic, but how would you lead it off?
So this is something we were sitting on for a while, but it keeps on coming up, and I sort of wanted to like surface it because I started thinking about this when we were playing Hitman, or when I was playing Hitman, and also like when I listened, Belle, to you playing Diablo or Destiny. And some of the frustrations that I've heard you have with other games too.
Yes.
Like Hitman is a really, really interesting environmental puzzle game. And it's just garbage at action. Like, you can try to force it to be an action game, and it will let you do this thing. But if you try to play Hitman as an action game, it's not going to be fun. It's like not a fun experience. And like similarly, like Destiny has some like really, like Bungie knows how to do gunplay. It's got really, Destiny has this really tight core gameplay loop around just like really excellent gunplay, and like everything else is secondary. And like we've been talking about Warframe, and Warframe is this game about movement, and it's hugely about movement. And so, and because it's so much about movement, there's a bunch of other stuff that it just isn't. It's not really focusing on, and like it doesn't like if you compare straight like shooting bullets gunplay between Destiny and Warframe, like Destiny comes out on top, but Warframe has so much more variance in everything that it's doing because its gunplay is kind of secondary. So if a gun feels a little loose or a little weird, like that's fine. But notably, Warframe is very, very particular about how and where you can manipulate the way you move, and it's usually sliders in it's usually like basically relatively small sliders on the axes that it's already working with. So like you can slide a little better, or you can jump a little further, or you can float a little more, but it doesn't really radically change your core movement because that core movement is the core gameplay loop. And it just got me thinking about like playing games for what they're good at versus what you might want them to be good at, or what I want them to be good at, or what, you know, people are expecting. MMOs definitely have this, where like Final Fantasy is so good at like its main story quest and its raid content, and like I don't really have a lot of fun with a lot of the other stuff that it's doing. And I feel like, and like the thing that really stood out to me is like I feel like my experience playing FF14 and enjoying it more was it improved dramatically when I stopped trying to make it do things it wasn't good at.
Well, and I have the same experience like when I play World of Warcraft, but I allow myself to do it just completely casually with no expectation that I'm going to do serious content. I enjoy it. Like, I have fun running around, running old content, but anytime I try and do like a raid encounter, it just pisses me off to no end how wishy-washy its advisement of mechanics are. So if I can get myself in a position where I don't care about that, I'm usually happy for a while. But like once I start trying to care about it, I get frustrated because it doesn't do that well. Which is weird considering like it's largely a game about raiding, but I feel like it doesn't do raids well.
Yeah. And like I've definitely had games where I want them to be like, because I want them to be something where they're not, or I'll listen to somebody else who's like they want the game to be something that it isn't, and have a hard time enjoying it for what it is. Like Andromeda is another one of those games where I went back and started playing it again recently, and it's really good. It's doing a totally different thing in a bunch of different ways from Mass Effect, but it's doing what it's trying to do really, really well. But because I went into it expecting Mass Effect, like the original trilogy, it was disappointing for me.
Yeah, whereas for me, Andromeda did all the things that I really enjoyed from Mass Effect. Like, Mass Effect 2 was my favorite of the games because it had a very, I'm going to go off on little missions with this group of people feel. And that's kind of what Andromeda is as a whole, is I'm going to go off on little missions with a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's driven me to kind of spend more time trying to understand how games want me to play them, because a lot of times when they have a particular thing, like when they want me to play them in a particular way, there's a reason, and it's usually like because it's what that game does best. And trying to figure out how to get into that mindset for different games has been a thing that I've been trying to do more recently.
That makes sense.
I found myself really enjoying what's the game? The Witcher 3. Much more than I expected, because sure, it lets you be an awful person, or you can not be an awful person, but it supports you, either whatever choice you decide to make. And so kind of just getting into it and being like, oh, this is what this game is doing, and some of the stuff that this game is doing, it does really, really well. I can kind of appreciate that. And I think it also helps me spend less time being frustrated at games. Like, we talked about Octopath recently, and I'd sort of been thinking about it since. And, like, Octopath is doing a particular thing, and I don't actually really enjoy that particular thing it's doing. So even though it's got a bunch of other things that I feel like I might enjoy about it, it's not really a game for me. But yeah, I don't know if any of that makes sense or resonates or anything.
No, it absolutely makes sense. I find it really hard to get into that mindset with MMOs, though, because I've played so many of them over the years that it's very difficult for me not to want them to be better than they actually are at times, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's a big contributing factor as to why we're not really seeing new MMOs come out. Is because like even like we're sort of like trying to chase what we once had in MMOs, but like it's hard to get there. And it's hard to say for certain that people even still really want those kinds of games, because there's a different thing going on there that isn't capturable.
Right. Well, and I think what makes it more so with MMOs is the fact that, like, in a lot of places, you're not actually playing the game for the sake of the game.
Yeah.
You're playing the game because that's what your friends are playing, and you want to hang out with your friends, so you just wish it was this, but this.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really like where you start and end as far as what you want in an MMO is. Which is why I think stuff like Destiny and Warframe and Anthem have really started to pick up a bit more, because it's kind of like it's like a new thing. It's a here's a kind of game that is sort of similar on a variety of axes, but isn't, you kind of go into it without expectations, or without as many expectations. Because I definitely am enjoying, and to sort of tie it back to earlier in the show, like I'm definitely enjoying Anthem a lot more than I expected to, but I also didn't really have any expectations. Like my expectations for Anthem were kind of low, but it meant that I had a lot more space to be. I've had a lot more space to be pleasantly surprised, and also to discover what that game does well without me trying to force what I want to do onto it.
Well, and I think the benefit that it has over some games is that each one of the suits feels different, like you're playing a slightly different game. So you can tailor it towards your interests. Like, I'm super comfortable with the Ranger, but like the Ranger is the most Destiny-ish of the classes.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting sort of design choice on Anthem's part is it can do that and make it feel pretty good, and so it does. And so it kind of the flip side to this whole thing is if your game can support a wide variety of experiences, it should try. It's that tension between design and audience.
So I wonder, does that mean that as we continue to release games of a particular type, like basically this is why there are the cycles we have, like we haven't seen MMOs because we're kind of we've mined that we've mined that ore for too long, and now there's nothing left to really go with those other than this like new thing that's not really an MMO, but it's the looter shooter with big open with big multiplayer lobbies essentially.
Well, so we've talked about this before on the show that like when a game reaches a point of being a solved problem, it's kind of hard to go anywhere else without retreading the ground that you've been on so many times. And like early MMOs were trying to figure out, or MMORPGs to clarify, were trying to figure out like how to build this virtual world. And we reached a point where like, oh no, we kind of have the secret sauce now, and it's just going to be iteration.
And
shooters,
also once we had the thing, a lot of people realized, oh, this isn't as great as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Well, and shooters were the same way. Like we've played a lot of those games on AggroChat Game Club, like Tron 2.0, for example. That was definitely a game where they hadn't quite figured out what we have now determined is the perfect control mechanism for a shooter. But now that we have it, we're not innovating on the shooter at all anymore. We're just creating more content for a shooter.
I mean, Battle Royale was kind of an innovation. And now we're iterating on that as well.
Battle Royale, though, was not a mechanical. I think it was a structure innovation. I mean, because, all the Battle Royale games pretty much follow the same third-person control scheme that, like, all the other games do right now.
Yeah, and I think that there's some, I mean, even some of the like really creative Battle Royale stuff, like the horror games, like Dead by Daylight, are you sort of, there's sort of this thing where like once the form is established, then you start messing around with the structure. But then once the form and the structure are established, you sort of don't have anywhere to go, like Kodra was saying. I think adventure games definitely make me definitely ring with that to me.
Well, I mean, it's a lot like a haiku or iambic pentameter. Like, there's a structure now, and people keep swapping content in and out of that structure. And we've reached that point with games where, like, this is a form, and this is what people are going to expect if you're doing this thing. It needs to follow these rules.
Yeah, and the trick to innovate, like there's always the sort of common refrain in game dev that like players don't actually want innovation; they want the same thing but better. And it's largely true, but only if you think about innovating in an existing space.
Mm-hmm.
If you can build the thing that everybody didn't realize they wanted, that's where the innovation lies. Sort of like tapping into that, which is why you see these things.
That's how you get something that's truly new and different, because nobody knows they want it, because it doesn't exist yet.
And the core difference is like once upon a time, those successes seemed pretty small. However, gaming as a whole has increased so large that when one of those blows up, you have millions of people that swarm to the thing.
Mm-hmm. Nobody knew they wanted Minecraft until Minecraft existed.
Right.
Yeah. And then once Minecraft existed, it went gigantic like immediately.
Well, the same was true with like when the battle royale genre finally coalesced, because PUBG wasn't the first game to do this. It was just the one that got all the levers in the right position. And then truly it wasn't until Fortnite that it blew up the way that it did. So like you had an initial Quake and an aftershock that was bigger than the initial Quake.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me to watch how quickly that's evolving now, because now you've got Apex Legends, and Apex Legends has gotten tremendous really, really fast.
Like 24 million players in the first week, something like that.
That's nuts.
And that only works because we've broadened the base massively. Like, I think at this point there's no such thing as a kid that isn't a game player. Like, I just don't think that exists anymore. Like,
no, it doesn't. It's like 92% of the population of the US population plays video games at some level. I mean, it's like why you have what was the comment about the Tetris games, the like kinds of the people getting trashed by like, yeah, just like watching like Twitch streamers get destroyed by people, by accounts that are like love my kids 72.
Yep.
Because they've just been playing Tetris, like, I don't know, somebody who's just been playing Tetris for
years.
Well, so the funny thing is like, if you look back to Tetris when it came on the scene, sure, it had already existed on the PC for a while, but like when the Game Boy came out with Tetris, like there was an explosion similar to this, and like Tetris was far from the only puzzle game that suddenly came onto the market. You had tons of other people trying to cash in on this puzzle game phenomenon. And for every Tetris, there was a Columns.
I think I liked Columns.
I mean, I liked Columns too. It was doing something slightly different.
It wasn't Tetris.
No, but like it was an almost direct like aftershock of Tetris. Because I think the first Columns was on the Master System as well. Although, so like another side of this discussion real quick is, I think there are times where, like, there are a lot of games out there that are like hipster darlings, for lack of a better term, that a certain group of players really loves a game. And I think they may be in a situation where, like, that is a group of players that got what that game was trying to do. Whereas most people expected it to be something else.
Yeah, and like that's definitely a thing that happens too. Or the even weirder case where a game that really wasn't that good turns out to have some like weird unintended mode that people just love.
I mean, okay, I'm going to throw out Simon's Quest, which is a game that is universally panned because it was not Castlevania or Castlevania 3.
Let's be clear, though. Simon's Quest is the precursor to Symphony of the Night.
Exactly. Like, we would not have Symphony of the Night if it were not for Simon's Quest. It was like a very raw prototype of what Symphony of the Night was trying to do. Like,
and it didn't work, but he got to try again later.
I latched onto it with both hands as a kid, though. Like, I loved that game. I was so disappointed when Castlevania 3 came out and it wasn't more of Castlevania 2. Like, I was so on board for that game.
I'm there with you.
I also liked Zelda 2. But again, it wasn't doing the thing that anyone expected it to do. And I feel like, to some extent, Zelda 2, what it was trying to do was perfected in ActRaiser. I don't know. I just think every so often there's a game that was before its time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or that it didn't have the fidelity at the time to be able to carry off what it was trying to do.
Pour one out for Star Wars Galaxies.
Yeah, and that's another prime example. I also think Matrix Online was doing a lot of interesting things. It just really didn't do them in a way that anyone wanted to do it.
This is true.
Anyway, so I think at this point we've gone our allotted time. Any final thoughts, any last things to add to this topic or any other topics that we've discussed?
Orphan is doing weekend events for the anniversary. Go kill some things, get your parts for a Saren Prime.
Is it actually just parts for a Saren Prime, or is it
It's
just
relics for a Saren Prime.
So
It's
you
a
have
chance
to
at a Saren Prime.
You also have to get a little lucky, is what you're
You
saying.
have to get a little lucky.
Okay.
You can work with other players to decrease the effect of luck significantly.
That's fair.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night!
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.